All right, let's jump right into our deep dive today. You're a military history buff, right?
Definitely. Can't get enough of it.
Well, today, we're going deep into the fall of the Roman Empire.
One of the biggest turning points in history.
And we're focusing on how barbarian migrations and all those internal Roman conflicts really set the stage.
Oh yeah, this migrations, that's a story in itself.
We're talking Visigoths,
Yeah.
Alaric, Emperor Valens.
Huge names, pivotal battles. The Battle of Adrianople, for example.
We're going to unpack all that. And Theodosius I, Stilicho,
The choices these guys made.
impacted the whole map of Europe.
Absolutely. Changed the course of history.
So before we get into specifics, paint me a picture. When you hear fall of Rome, what comes to mind?
I think a lot of people picture the sudden dramatic collapse, like some big cinematic moment.
Yeah, I get it.
But it was a lot more complex than that. It was more of a gradual decline.
The decline.
Yeah, kind of like a fortress crumbling from within.
From within, okay.
But also under attack from the outside, too.
And those attacks, that's where we get the barbarian invasions.
Right, the migration period.
Which honestly sounds like a chain reaction,
Oh, it was. The Huns came pushing west.
pushing other tribes out of the way.
Exactly, forcing them into Roman territory. The Visigoths, for example.
Okay, so imagine you're a Roman official back then.
Late 4th century, things are already tense.
And these Visigoths show up on your doorstep. They want refuge.
What do? Tough situation.
Super tough. I mean, on one hand, potential threat, right?
Right.
But on the other hand, you've got your legions need manpower.
Always short on manpower, and these guys are warriors.
So what did Emperor Valens do?
Well, he saw an opportunity. He saw the Visigoths as potential soldiers.
Integrate them into the Roman army.
Exactly. Boost his forces seemed like a good idea at the time.
But I'm guessing it didn't go so smoothly.
Well, you got to imagine the average Roman citizen.
Seeing these, well, barbarians in their midst.
These were people they'd been fighting against for generations.
So resentment starts brewing.
Oh, yeah. And it boils over in 377 AD, the Visigoths rebel.
Leading to.
The Battle of Adrianople, 378 AD. Major turning point.
This wasn't just a small battle, was it?
No, it was a disaster for the Romans. Over 2/3 of the legions wiped out.
That's massive.
And to make matters worse, Emperor Valens himself killed in action.
Talk about a blow to morale.
Oh, yeah. Adrianople changed everything. It showed the world that Rome was vulnerable.
And the Visigoths, not to be messed with.
That's right. Rome's enemies took notice. Things were shifting.
Under Theodosius I takes the reins in the east. What does he do?
He's got a huge mess to clean up, right? So first, he deals with the Visigoths.
But how? They're a powerful force now.
He takes a surprising approach, diplomacy, signs a peace treaty with them in 382.
Whoa, really? So he lets them stay within Roman territory.
It does. It was controversial for sure. Think about it, like a modern nation giving citizenship to a former enemy army.
Risky move. What else does Theodosius do?
Well, his second big act was the Edict of Thessalonica, 380 AD. This one's huge for understanding Europe's religious landscape today.
Lay it on me.
So back then, Rome had all sorts of religions. But this edict, it declared Nicene Christianity, what we now call Catholicism, as the official state religion.
So everyone had to convert.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
All other faiths were outlawed. This changed everything, set the stage for centuries of religious conflict in Europe.
It's a reminder of how politics and religion can have these huge ripple effects through history.
Absolutely. And then there's Hypatia, a brilliant philosopher and mathematician in Alexandria.
What happened to her?
She was brutally murdered by a Christian mob, a stark example of the violence that can erupt when religious intolerance takes hold.
Tragic.
It shows how political decisions can have these unintended and sometimes really dark consequences.
Okay, so peace with the Visigoths, religious upheaval. What was Theodosius's third big move?
He reunifies the Roman Empire. It had been divided for decades.
So one emperor again.
For a short time, yeah. But then he dies in 395 AD.
And what happens then?
He divides the empire between his two sons. Honorius gets the west, Arcadius the east.
Ah, and that's the problem.
Yeah, this division proves fatal. The Western Roman Empire, plagued by internal problems, external threats. Now they're on their own.
And that brings us back to Alaric.
The Visigoth leader. He sees that the empire is divided, weakened.
He's not going to just sit around, is he?
Nope. He basically says, forget that peace treaty, and starts raiding Roman territory.
Testing the waters.
Exactly. But then we get this Roman general, Stilicho.
This is where things get really interesting.
Oh yeah, Stilicho's a key player in all this.
And we'll dive into his story and how his actions really set the stage for the sack of Rome in our next segment.
So we've got Alaric and his Visigoths making moves against the Western Roman Empire.
And for those who love military history, this is where things get really good.
You said it. We've got a Roman general with barbarian roots, a young emperor who doesn't really know what he's doing, and a Visigoth leader who's as cunning as they come.
Yeah, it sounds like a powder keg about to explode.
It was. So let's set the scene. Alaric and his Visigoths. They're tearing through the Balkans.
Causing chaos.
Big time. The Eastern Roman Empire is basically panicking.
They're calling for help, right?
They are. And who comes to the rescue? Stilicho.
Wait, the half Vandal, half Roman general?
The one and only. He was the Western Empire's best bet.
It's wild, right? This guy, born into a Germanic tribe, ends up the top general in Rome.
Tells you something about how those lines were blurring, especially in the military.
So how did he do against Alaric?
Oh, Stilicho. He was the real deal. Fought Alaric on several occasions, pushed back the Visigoths, even captured Alaric's wife at one point.
Impressive.
He knew Roman tactics, but also understood how the barbarians fought.
Sounds like he was single-handedly keeping the Western Empire together.
Pretty much. But even Stilicho couldn't be everywhere at once.
Right, the empire was huge.
Massive. And while he's dealing with Alaric, other parts of the empire start falling apart. Revolts, uprisings.
Trying to manage that whole territory, it must have been a nightmare.
It was. Resources stretched thin, constant pressure.
So what's Stilicho do?
He makes a decision that's going to raise some eyebrows. He enlists Alaric and his Visigoths to help defend Gaul.
Whoa, Gaul. That's modern-day France, right?
You got it. Basically, he turns to a former enemy to help protect Roman territory.
That's a bold move. What is he thinking?
Stilicho was a pragmatist. He knew the empire was in trouble. Desperate times, desperate measures. But his enemies in Rome.
They see it as weakness, right?
Oh, yeah. They'd always been suspicious of Stilicho, because of his Vandal background.
And they use this to their advantage.
Exactly. They whisper in young Emperor Honorius's ear, convince him that Stilicho is a traitor.
Talk about a smear campaign.
And it works. In 408 AD, Stilicho is arrested, executed for treason.
Wow, they basically chopped off their own arm, strategically speaking.
It's a major turning point. They just took out their best general, and Alaric.
He's not going to be happy about this.
Furious. He was waiting on payment for defending Gaul, remember?
Right, so he sees this as a betrayal.
Completely. He realizes that Rome can't be trusted, and that with Stilicho gone, they're wide open.
This is what leads to the sack of Rome, right?
It all builds up to that moment, 410 AD.
The Eternal City, about to face its greatest test.
Can you imagine what it must have been like for those Roman citizens?
To see this army, this force they thought they could control, at their gates.
Terrifying. This wasn't just armies clashing, it was a clash of civilizations. The old world against the new.
So walk me through it. How does it actually go down?
Alaric's not interested in talking. He wants action. The Roman Senate, they're scrambling. They try to buy him off.
Bribes.
Mountains of gold, silver, even pepper, which was worth a fortune back then.
Wow. So what does Alaric say?
He laughs in their faces, basically. He knows Rome is weak. He knows they're ripe for the taking.
And he was right. August 24, 410 AD, the Visigoths breached the walls.
It sent shockwaves through the world. Rome, the symbol of power, order, civilization, brought down by these so-called barbarians.
It's hard to grasp the magnitude of that event.
It really is.
Yeah.
Now, it's important to remember the sack of Rome wasn't just this mindless orgy of destruction that you sometimes see in movies.
It was more complicated than that.
Much more. Alaric actually gave orders to spare churches, Christian sanctuaries, told his men not to kill unarmed civilians.
He didn't want total annihilation.
No, he saw himself as a conqueror, not a destroyer.
Interesting. And the Visigoths were Christians themselves, right?
Yeah, but a different branch than the Romans, so maybe that played a role.
Maybe. But regardless, the impact of the sack, it was huge.
Oh, yeah. Rome was never the same. That aura of invincibility, gone.
It's a powerful lesson.
Yeah.
Even the mightiest empires can fall.
Exactly. But the story doesn't end there. What happens next? Where do Alaric and his Visigoths go from here?
That's a story for our next segment. We'll explore the aftermath of the sack, the fate of the Visigoths, and what all this means for the future of Europe. We've seen it all. The Eternal City sacked, those legendary Roman legions defeated, and a Roman general with Vandal blood betrayed by his own people. What a wild ride.
It is a pretty amazing story. And even though Rome wasn't totally wiped out, that sacking back in 410 AD, That was a turning point, a scar that never really faded.
So what happens next? What becomes of all these major players?
Well, Alaric, the Visigoth leader, he doesn't get to enjoy his victory for very long.
What do you mean?
He dies that same year, 410 AD, gets hit with a sudden illness.
Wow, so soon after the sack of Rome.
Yeah, pretty crazy. Some historians think it was malaria, some say something else entirely.
I even read somewhere that there's this legend they buried him under a river.
I've heard that one too.
Slaves dug the grave, and then supposedly they were killed so the location would stay secret.
To keep the Romans from messing with his tomb.
Talk about an epic way to go out.
It definitely adds to the legend. But just because Alaric's gone doesn't mean the Visigoths vanish.
They keep moving, right?
Yeah. They head west, new leader takes over, a guy named Ataulf. They eventually settle down in what we now call southern France and Spain.
So they ditch the ruins of the Roman Empire and start building a new kingdom.
That's right. It's not just about destruction, you see. It's also about new things popping up, new powers, new kingdoms rising out of the chaos.
And that's the migration period in a nutshell, right?
Exactly. Those Visigoths, they're just one example. Lots of Germanic tribes were on the move. Not just raiding and pillaging, they were looking for new homes, new opportunities, and all those migrations. They changed the face of Europe.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. The map of Europe as we know it today, shaped by all this.
It really is, and it's important to remember those barbarians. They weren't just some mindless mob. They had their own cultures, laws, ways of life, and the way they mixed with the Romans. Super complex, sometimes fighting, sometimes cooperating. They didn't just tear Rome down, they changed it.
So, the fall of Rome, it wasn't just about losing battles.
No, it was about not being able to adapt to a changing world. It was a failure of leadership, of unity. Rome couldn't deal with all the problems, both inside and out. You know, it makes you wonder, could Rome have survived if they hadn't made those mistakes?
I was thinking the same thing. What if Stilicho hadn't been executed? What if Rome had stayed united, stronger? Could they have weathered the storm, that whole migration period?
It's a big what if, isn't it? Fun to think about, but we'll never know for sure. But it shows you how one event, even something like one general getting killed, can change the course of history, for empires, for everyone.
It's incredible the impact one event can have. Even in its fall, though, Rome left its mark. Its laws, language, culture, the whole concept of empire.
It's all there in our world today. The battles, the migrations, the rise and fall of empires. And when we study all that, when we understand the forces that shaped our past, it makes us appreciate history even more. It's all connected to who we are now.
What a journey. I hope this deep dive into the fall of Rome and all its military significance has given you a fresh perspective. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into history. See you next time.